And welcome to this edition of Cross's Corner. I'm Marty Cross, and with me is the amazing polymath, Mary Mazzio. Hi, Mary.
Great to see you, Martin. What's happening?
Oh, my God. Now, I'm so excited to talk to you about so many things. We formally met, although we were on teams together back in Barcelona and so on at the Olympics, but we kind of met properly in Belgrade for the World Championships, where your daughter was rowing in the US Women's Eight.
Indeed. And so exciting for my husband as well and I to be over. And as we were talking, just before coming live, to have a child that has way more talent than you ever had as an athlete is so exciting, so fun, and really gives you a chance to live vicariously another time around, right? And whether she likes it or not, I'll share some of the challenges that I faced as an athlete. And she is just an amazing competitor, fearless, and just unlike me. I'm sort of out there, and she has no ego. I would stroke no matter what seat you put me in. I'd stroke the boat. And Dave's perspective is, whatever is going to make the boat go faster is where I should sit. And so he's always been like laser focused around teamwork, what it means to be a good team member. And that's exciting when your daughter is frankly far more mature as an athlete than you might have ever been.
So she was in the seventh seat of that eight, which was a pretty key seat.
And exciting to see her and Charlotte Buck, right, who was stroking the boat. I mean, this was a new combination, and Daisy was on fire. And, she taught me before the race, and she's like, the Romanians are going to be fast, and I'm really excited to see what we can do. And so she is very much focused on, she's just a fearless competitor. Didn't matter that this was her first time at the senior level. She was just going to dig in and push those legs as fast as they could go. And it's exciting that she is not intimidated in the least. I mean, I remember at World Championships looking over, and you're like, oh, shit. At least I was.
Yeah.
And she's not. She is just head in. Okay, let's get to the 500 to go, and then it's on. It's on like Donkey Kong. So she has an ability that I think I was the kind of athlete where I never gave up. I was always in it. And my doubles partner reminded me the other day. She said, Mary, Daisy has this exuberance around racing that doesn't matter how intimidating the competition might be. She's going to go for it. And she's like, you were that way. And I don't remember myself that way. She's like, you'd always be like, we're getting off the start. We're going to jump the start. And my doubles partner was a very rules-based.
Oh.
She thought jumping the start was cheating. And I was like, no, dude, like you got to take every advantage, especially against, these unbelievably talented women around us, like every advantage. And we can do it. Maybe we can't do it all the time, but maybe today is our day. And I didn't remember myself, but that's, Daisy has that sort of fearlessness, exponential to what I ever carried in my career.
So sometimes when you've got two kids, one's like their dad and one's like their mum. So is Daisy more like you or more like Jay?
Oh, wow. She has, so of the two, my husband was a bronze medalist. You might know as a lightweight athlete. He was one of the lighter guys, and he was a machine. This is Jay Manson. After World Championships, I'd say, you want to go to the party? Ooh, ooh. And he'd be like, I feel sick. I can't go. And I'm like, oh, I probably should have pulled harder in my race, because I was always up for the party. And he could go into the pain cave and go into tunnel vision. And that's a trait that Daisy has. She will draw blood in the last 500 and just completely go into another zone. And I think that's an exceptional talent and something Jay had that she 100% inherited from him. I think, yeah. You got to call it where it is. And so I think she gets something from me. She has pretty extraordinary VO2 that I had back in the day, things of that nature. But boy, she could race like my husband.
So the US women's 8 is kind of on this trajectory. They didn't medal last year, but this year was the silver medal. I mean, how excited were the guys in the crew with that result?
So we took some of them out to dinner that night. They were over the moon. And I think they were over the moon because all the returning Olympians that had come back had not won a medal. Yeah. And, the U.S. women's team was, especially the 8, was so dominant. And to be on this upswing was, I think, really exciting for them. And of course for us, and for Daisy to be part of that. And a material part of that was really exciting. And, we've seen her time and time again sort of be on teams, and she doesn't just bring her athletic force, but she brings a sense of teamwork that, boy, I wish I had early in my career like she has. And one of the young women said to me, she said, before Daisy arrived, we were a serious team, maybe a little bit sad. And she's like, Daisy's here and we're a happy team. And I thought, wow, like just so beautiful. And you can approach your competition a little differently when you're in that frame. And that was exciting to hear her teammates share that with Jay and I. Like, she's always been that way, a team player, no ego, and unlike her mother, unfortunately. I had an outsized ego. Even I was a good athlete, I wasn't a great athlete. And Daisy has much less of she's focused on the team and a far better athlete than I ever could have been. So that's exciting.
So have you booked anything for Paris yet, or is it too early?
Everybody has to go through it again. So, again, Martin, this, having been through that Olympic process, having been through the quadrennium, nothing is certain. Everything starts fresh. And so but I have to tell you, that's a great question. I'll tell you why. My mother, who had no money, after 1991, I was in the women's quad. She said, I need to book my ticket now or I can't afford to go. This was to Barcelona. And I said, Mom, Igor Grenko was our coach. He had already come up to me. He's like, Mary, you're too light. You're too short. You're such a fighter. He's like, I'm going to use you as my rabbit for everybody else because I don't think I can win a medal with you, but you're going to be the barometer. And I was like, oh, and I'll show him. Well, in fact, so I said to my mother, I'm like, Mom, it could go either way. This is going to be a very bumpy ride. And my mother said, I'm buying my ticket. And she bought her ticket a year in she bought her ticket a year in advance. She found a place to stay with some nuns that wouldn't cost. She got my sister's tickets and she was like, I'm going and you're going to be there. And like, that's such a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
And I just loved that she had that kind of confidence. Right. Of course I have all the confidence in Daisy, especially seeing this new combination. It's so exciting to see. But I think again, anything can happen. This, I know this, and you and I know, having been through it, in an Olympic year, so I don't want to say anything to jinx anything. That being said, I lived in France as a student, and boy, would I love to re-exercise my French language skills.
Oh yeah, that sounds good. Now, the first film you made, we were talking about it, A Hero for Daisy, and there is a little clip of Chris Ernst, who's kind of the star of the film, who can talk about as well, just playing with Daisy at the end. When did you decide that that sort of legacy had been passed on? Was it when you saw Daisy row at Yale, or was it when you saw her in the national team, or will it be if she does make the Olympics?
So honestly, I see the legacy of Chris Ernst in two ways. The first of which is the film came out in 2000, A Hero for Daisy. And it was Chris Ernst and her Yale teammates that really led and elucidated what gender equity meant, right? Women had equal right to play, to participate. And what did that mean for our sport? Well, our film sort of blew up. Athletic directors across the country started hosting screenings and events. And there were so many women that then began to row, saying, I want to be like Chris Ernst. And many of those women were our gold medal winners in several women's eights. And to hear from younger athletes say, I decided to pick up an oar because I saw what Chris Ernst did. Her legacy had this incredible ripple effect. And particularly around gender equity, because athletic directors said, well, wait a minute, I need to balance numbers. I'm seeing this movie. I'm seeing what these Yale women did.
Yeah.
And great beneficiary in the United States has been the introduction of rowing teams across, huge universities that didn't have them. I remember we had an event, I think it was the University of, might have been Minnesota. And they said, can Chris Ernst come out? Chris is a little bit of a recluse. She hates attention. I still think I love her dearly. She's so intimidating. But she really hated the attention that came with this film. And so Chris is like, I'm unavailable. So they said, Mary, you were an athlete. I'm like, yeah, I was an okay athlete. And will you come out and speak about Title IX? And so I get out there and the provost says, we're expecting an overflow crowd. We have like 800 or 1,000 seat theater. And I'm like, wait, what?
Wow.
And they said, well, the men's wrestling team will be in attendance. They are very much opposed to what's happening around Title IX. So be ready to be booed. And I was like, I got sweat stains. I'm like, oh, wow. And so I introduced the film and I say, look, I understand that the men's wrestling team is here. Men's wrestling is being cut all across the nation. I'm like, you guys, your uni suits cost what, $150. Your wrestling mat is what, $300. Why is your sport being cut to expand the men's football team or to expand the men's basketball team? Introduction of women does not necessarily mean you should be cutting men's teams, but instead, the Women's Sports Foundation had this great analogy. She said, if you're a family and you buy 2 steaks, you don't say to your daughters, my 2 sons get the steaks and you get nothing. You split the steak. And athletic directors were not splitting the steaks, right? They were prioritizing certain programs, and huge fat in especially men's football, which, the NCAA found that 80% of football teams lose money. So there's this idea and myth that every football program, right, is generating revenue, when in fact that's not the case. So the film I wasn't booed. And the wrestling coach, who was the USA wrestling coach at the time, came up to me and he said, you and I might not agree, but I really respect Chris Ernst and what her teammates did. And I was like, okay, you might not change everybody's minds, but if you can open up a little bit of understanding, how exciting is that? And the other legacy piece, so Chris had just an enormous impact on really generations of women. But the impact she had on me personally,
Yeah.
I was cut, unlike you, Martin, from a number of national teams, right? Like, the cut list goes up. In the beginning, I was the first one cut. By the end, I was like the last name on the list, right? And I remember the Olympic coach or one of the national team coaches pulled me aside. This might have been 89 or 90 and said, Mary, we like your tights. You tell funny stories at dinner, but I don't know if you have what it takes. And I remember just being devastated. And I was was just starting like a young lawyer at the time. I was kind of a shitty lawyer because I'm rowing.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a great rower because I'm working full, right? Like, and so I go to the boathouse and I see Chris Ernst, and Chris was a veteran at that point. I was kind of a rookie, right? And she said, "Oh, did you get cut?" And I'm like, "Shit, I got cut." And she's like, "All right, suit up." And I'm like, "Chris, I might clear out my locker. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just not." And she's like, "Stop." She's like, "You are so fast and you don't even believe it." And she said, "And second of all, anytime," and I was inconsistent, right? She's like, "Anytime you lose, you have an excuse." What the is that about? And I was like, I looked at her and I said, "Chrissy, I don't make excuses." And then I was like, "Oh, I make excuses all the time for my
All the
performance,
time.
all the time." And it was like this cold slap, and I was like, I make excuses all the time. And when you make excuses, right, you don't learn. And that moment on, she's like, "Okay, now we're going to suit up. We're going to run stadiums. We're going to throw up and then we'll go out for breakfast." Right? Like, that's Chris Ernst. I'm like, "I'm up. I'm doing it." And that year, like, that changed everything for me. I stopped
Really?
going to parties. I started drilling it. I started going to a sports psychologist who was like, "Mary,
Ah.
I'm looking to my left. I'm looking to my right. What's she doing? What's she doing? Where am I? Why am I not in this boat?" Right. And so he instilled in me that ability to concentrate, stay in the present, one stroke at a time. Don't worry about, the stroke before or the stroke after. And he had me do these math problems like in front of the TV. I couldn't do any at first. And then by the end, it was extraordinary. And I think, but for Chris Ernst, like, I never would have been able to begin to realize my abilities as an athlete, but even as a person, because I learned to fully commit without having a safety net of excuses, right? Because I cared what people thought. What if I failed? And then I was like, if I fail, I'm going to fail honestly, and I'm going to have no safety net. And if I don't make the team, well, it won't be for lack of like every advantage. What am I doing? How am I approaching this? What's my diet? What's my training? Am I doing the stuff that I hate? Right. And so Hartmut Buschbacher came in to coach the women.
I remember Hartmut.
He knew exactly what my weakness was. He had me put a bungee cord around my single, do 5-minute pieces at a 24. Right. And it was all about building strength and right.
Yeah.
And it was transformative. And so I went from like maybe, I don't know, being 13th in my single, right? All of a sudden I'm third, fourth, like it was dramatic, right?
Wow.
That shift. And then I really started that platform of, okay, what can I really do in this sport? So that was Chris's legacy was very personal to me. And then her other legacy writ large beyond the generations of women, there were lots of people saw the movie. It just kind of went crazy when it first came out. New York Times. It was a tsunami. Well, a parent group came to watch the movie, and they had, again, Chris was a recluse. They had me come out to, I think it was Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah.
They bust in. There were like 1,000 girls. New Balance had come in to sponsor the film along with Welch. So I had my New Balance on, And like, who's got New Balance? And girls are like shaking their sneakers. They're teenagers, right? They're so excited. Long story short, these parents ended up filing a lawsuit because their daughters were playing on landfills. You know, the boys were on manicured lawns. The boys had night games where parents could go watch. The girls were,
Yeah.
Anyways, there were a whole litany of Title IX, but just wasn't fair. And so this parent group filed this lawsuit. I get a call 12 years later. This film comes out in 2000. And the call was, hey, Mary, do you remember like the event? I'm like, how could I forget 1,000 girls screaming with their like, that was amazing. And they said, well, we wanted you to know the Supreme Court found in our favor this week.
Wow.
Up and I like you never know how this medium can affect people or change. And that film, that little film, A Hero for Daisy, which really was made for my daughter and my son, but that went on to have reverberations, and it was all about the message of Chris Ernst. So her legacy and that of her teammates that had the courage to stand up and say, this isn't fair. And they used their voices, right? They weren't afraid to stand up and demand fairness and change. So that was such an exciting journey.
There are two directions here. And well, I kind of would like, while I've got you here, just to talk about being on the team and your experience as an Olympian. But also I'm really interested in terms of the whole thing with film directing and what drew you to that. But if first, because you made the team first in 91, is that correct?
Well, actually, before then, I was the World University Games sculler. So we'll call it the USA B team.
Okay.
In 87 in Zagreb.
Yeah.
And that was just, right. I was in my single, didn't know what I could do. Really brand new to the single. Brand new to something. I had tried to get invited to like the sweep camps, and I was completely, forget about it. And so I started sculpting, and that's really when it began for me. And then I had an opportunity in 1988. So I'm the World University Games sculler in 87. In 88, I was just graduating from law school, and I was offered the opportunity to live and work in Korea. And I was, well, what's my shot at the 88 team? Probably, I'm young, right? Like probably, I don't know, not good. And so I went and I coached the Korean, basically their Olympic B team, their development team.
Yeah.
Guy from Australia, Brian Richardson.
I know Brian.
Brian was coaching the program. It was a hilarious, I couldn't speak. I could speak survival Korean. And so I began training with the Korean women, which was just hilarious. I ended up, funny story, somehow they allowed me to compete in the Korean Olympic trials.
You're kidding.
The biggest medal that I have in my entire collection. And I won, and I didn't, and I had friends in the audience that were in the stands that were Korean, and people were like, she's so rude. Doesn't she know? She's so rude to come here, right? Because it's like there was this concept of losing face, and I knew about that concept, but I was like, a race is a race, and that's a pretty cool medal. So I ended up winning the Korean trials, which is hilarious. And of course I wasn't Korean, and but then when I came home, I was like, okay, I'm going to just see what I can do with the sport. And then I made the team got cut in 90, and then made the team in 91. And that was really that transformative year when after it was in 90 where I was really questioning whether I continue in the sport. And then I was in the women's squad in 91 and in the women's double in 92.
Can you hear me, Mary?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Because I've stopped hearing you.
Uh-oh. you hear me now? Should I put on headphones? Can you hear me now?
Let me see. Go away. Go away. Leave.
Where did Martin Cross go?
I'm back.
Oh, good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Sorry.
I was like, maybe he had to go get a snack. Who knows?
No. I don't know what happened there, but anyway. So you made the team in 91, and I guess that must have been a big deal for you.
You know what? It was, because it proved to me that that what Chris Ernst said, you have to believe it before it can actually happen, especially because I was a good athlete. I think if I had maybe trained properly, I would have even been better. But, that was back in the day where you're eating ho-hos and ring dings. And even, Hartmut had me eat 2 Snickers bars a day. He's like, you don't keep weight on when you race, like eat 2 Snickers bars a day. Unfortunately, that has come back to haunt me after my rowing days were over. But yeah, it was very exciting, and I stroked the boat, so of course that fits my personality. Whether I do it or not is a completely different. And as you see the best and the worst in people under those circumstances, particularly going into an Olympic year. And my dearest friends from that 92 team, right? My doubles partner, we could not have been more different. I don't even know if she liked me in the beginning, right? I'm loud and I'm brash and I'm optimistic and I'm like, jump the start. And she is very much of a rules, disciplined, quiet, diplomatic, very measured. And so we were like a very, Mutt and Jeff in many ways. And she is a rock. She went on, Cindy Ryder. She was completely overlooked in the system. And I was lucky to have her as a doubles partner. She went on and she was 6th in the world in her single the following year and had real talent. That, again, she was just somebody that was kind of outside the system. One of my dearest friends, and Andrea Tees, who I was in the quad with. So you build these relationships that you don't often realize will be lifelong. And one of our competitors that was 1 lane over in the Olympic Games, Annabelle Ayers, like we reconnected, years, and we're like tight as thieves. She is such a dear friend, and you have these shared experiences, which it's like, yes, it's wonderful to participate in the Olympic Games, but for me, it's the lessons that you learn as an athlete about commitment, about how to serve as a team. What does community mean? What's your obligation? How are you thinking about the community around you? And for me, I feel so lucky that I've been able to take so much from the sport, including creatively, right? With A Hero for Daisy. And then our most recent film, A Most Beautiful Thing, which, right? Like, so it's a little bit cyclical for me to be able to have this career where we started with a rowing theme movie and then just, our most recent film, come back to the sport that I love so dearly.
I mean, what struck you about A Most Beautiful Thing? Presumably you'd read the book. What what made you think this would make a great movie?
So Arshay Cooper, who of course wrote the book, somebody told me, hey, there's this guy from the west side of Chicago, and he wrote this book, and he's this all boys high school African-American rowing team. And I was like, yeah, that's fake news. No, like, I've been kicking around this sport. That is 100%. That's alternative facts. I read his book and I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. So I take to Twitter, @Arshay Cooper, compelling read. I'm knee deep in this legislative battle over my film, I Am Jane Doe, not really thinking. My phone rings 2 hours later. It's Arshay Cooper. He says, would you ever? And I'm like, oh my God, what a story. And he shared more than appeared in the pages of his book. And at the time, there was a lot of discussion, Martin, about who has the right to tell story, who has the right to tell certain stories. And I was going to a wedding officiated by an African-American pastor. And I said, we struck up this conversation. I said, this young man from the west side of Chicago has called me. I'm a blue-eyed white. And I said, but all my work has been with different communities that are not like me. And, and he said, Mary, whoa. He was a senior member of the, different organizations. And in any event, he said, when somebody calls you and asks you for help, who are you to say no on the basis, right? Like, and I was like, it freed me profoundly to say, yes, I can, Arshay. And let me try and do this in a way where my fingerprints are nowhere near this, right? Like, this is your story. This is not the story according to Mary Mazzio. This is your story, the story of your teammates. And then, of course, the more I dug in, the more I love these young men and what they taught me and how they lived and sort of the extraordinary impediments to success. And as Arshay will say, talent is everywhere. It's opportunity that isn't. And this was exhibit A of these young men in this predominantly white sport. And what was amazing and what's come out of this film, I mean, it got so much attention, was optioned for a Hollywood scripted series. Oh, I have to show you. Our dear friends at Fila, came in. We have a signature, a most beautiful thing. Shoe.
No.
I mean, who has a shoe dropped?
Crazy.
See the cross doors?
Yeah.
Right. And the conversations so there was the entertainment press, and then there was the policy impact. We were having screenings with it was amazing with CEOs inside the four walls of companies. How do you think about privilege? And how do you think about access? And because Arshay has such incredible generosity of spirit, it was a message that was easily absorbable and didn't make people feel on edge, right? And so for me, it recatalyzed for me. I'm somebody who didn't come from money. My mom had 2 nickels, barely was able to see the inside of a college. And yet I had extraordinary privilege because of the color of my skin. Same person, as my mother used to say, Mary, you always seem to be there when the bus comes. And I never knew what that meant until making this film. And it clarified for me that I was there and I could get on the bus because of the color of my skin. Somebody else, that bus would roll on by. And what Arshay has done, and the film catalyzed extraordinary philanthropy. And Arshay, even just last year, he is taking the sport by storm. And I think he himself single-handedly put about 3,000 Black and brown children on the water. Programs are expanding. We partnered with Hudson and Concept 2 that are giving away boats and oars and ergometers with grant money, that Arshay is administering from the Most Beautiful Thing Inclusion Fund. And he is a one-man wrecking show. It is so exciting. All of the African-American Olympians have joined A Most Beautiful Thing. And just like, I went to a gala in Newark maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was maybe one of a handful of people that were not people of color to go to a rowing event that was filled.
Wow.
Where mothers, African-American mothers, were pouring champagne over brand new Hudson, A Most Beautiful Thing shells. Like, I'm about to cry because this is, again, it's not me. I just get to build the amphitheater and the risers for somebody like an Arshay and his teammates. And Mike Tatey, the former U.S. Olympic coach, makes a cameo in the film. And, Mike has had some challenging years, right? And yet I found a brochure when the team was first formed 20 something years ago. Who was the first donor to that program? Mike Tatey, right?
Really?
Yeah. I was like, and he, of course, came out. He coached the guys. He has been involved with The Most Beautiful Thing, coaching young people, creating, better access to the sport. And so, my doubles partner and I went out, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, and you never used to see young people of color on the water.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing more and more children. I think the head of the Charles is coming up. 50 kids are being bussed in or something like that to meet with Arshay and David Banks and Akil Abdullah, right? Olympians for the U.S. team. And to have that sort of role modeling is so exciting. And I can't even, it's to be part of that. And just in Arshay's, be part of his posse is, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary privilege.
How did you get from being an attorney, a rowing attorney, to making films? Because obviously you're fantastic at it, but I mean, did you know you'd be fantastic at it? What were the steps?
No, and it's like that exuberance that you and I were talking about racing, right? You just can't be intimidated because there's always going to be scary things, whether it's the 6'4" German on your left or right. And I have to say, A Hero for Daisy, our very first movie, did take me. It was like lightning striking, but that work ethic that you have as an athlete, I was going to just kill myself. And so I'm writing my own for my first film. I'm like catering with bologna bad sandwiches for the crew. I'm writing press releases. I'm calling reporters, and it's sort of like this sheer doggedness. And I think it's like it's a force of will to make these projects because they're so expensive. To have them gain attention and have impact has been something that, honestly, I think I learned from A Hero for Daisy. We could have made A Hero for Daisy that's a Go Girl movie.
Yeah. We
could have made it a polemic. And then I remember, I don't know if it was my husband, Jay, but thinking, wait a minute, fathers could be tuning into this. Brothers could be tuning into this. How do we think about what the message might be? And so that has become emblematic of our work. Our films have the support of the right and the left, right? Republicans and Democrats, because we try not to politicize what is really an urgent human issue. And if you politicize it, you're going to immediately turn somebody off, right? And so how do you think about, so I think that has been in our DNA from A Hero for Daisy, is how do we create these messages where people can walk in the shoes of somebody else with a completely different experience and have an epiphany, as opposed to, like Michael Moore, for example. He is celebrated. He's an amazing documentary filmmaker, but he is a very partisan, right? He sort of preaches the choir. And we're a little bit of the exact opposite because, on my film, I Am Jane Doe, Cindy McCain, wife of John McCain, said to me, she's like, Mary, you're going to have to rub elbows with people you completely disagree with in order to have any impact or affect change. And I was like, you are 100% right. If you're not engaging on a human level with others, then there's no change that can happen. And I think like we live in such heated political, partisan times. That notion and what Cindy was articulating was, again, the notion of team. You might not like believe everything your teammate says or has or their political views or what have you, but you come together for a common cause. And I feel like my athletic experience really translated into that. And so I had no idea if I was going to be successful. In fact, when I was doing A Hero for Daisy, I had a stomach ache for a year. I had some private investors and I'm like, holy shit, how am I going to get there? Like, I don't know if I'm going to pay their money. Like, I just had a stomach.
Why did they invest in you?
I think because I was filled with passion.
Okay.
I certainly had never made a movie, but they were like, well, she was a pretty good lawyer. Like, she didn't wash out as a lawyer and she was an okay athlete. And so maybe something will. I have asked them of that because I got to a point where I could pay them all back, which is unusual in this business. And many of them didn't want to take their money back. And I think for them, it was, boy, this could be an interesting exercise if she's successful. And it's about many of my investors had daughters that were experiencing glass ceiling issues, impediments to that glass ceiling.
Yeah.
In fact, we had support from both Welch's and New Balance before we had any distribution. And it was because the CEOs of both companies had daughters that were facing gender equity issues and had people in their lives. And so I think that the content resonated and I feel very indebted because I just, the chances of success at the beginning, just like my athletic career, appeared very dim.
Yeah.
Right. And so, my mother used to say, life is short. And if you fail, you can cry for a day. And I've had so much failure in my life, but she's like, you can cry for one day, then you get up, you pick yourself back out and you get back out there. And I feel like that's the lesson that I have always lived by. And I hope that my children live by as well.
One of the things that, as you were talking, particularly about, with polarized politics and trying to speak to both sides of the spectrum, and I noticed, I haven't watched them, but I noticed your films are about, some of your films are about migrant communities, like particularly in New York. How do you make a film about that particular issue that appeals to both sides of the spectrum?
That's a great question. We did a film with Lori Tisch, in fact, about food deserts in New York, right? This is just a systemic social justice issue. And it appealed again to the left and the right because it was that fundamental issue of fairness. We did a film about that was called Underwater Dreams, and it was about these undocumented young men from Arizona, which is the hot button for immigration. They were Mexican young men, and they built an underwater robot and ended up defeating MIT in this really amazing, sophisticated ROV underwater robotics competition. 16-year-old boys with jeans down to their knees, and and again, it was that notion of talent is everywhere. We as a country need to be able to figure out how to optimize. Look at this talent when we might say, oh, you belong in a Home Depot parking lot, right? On a day-to-day, subsistence level. No. We have extraordinary intelligence and humor and talent everywhere. And for Underwater Dreams, that was such an interesting exercise because the film comes out, there's huge receptivity within the White House. For example, President Obama made remarks around the film. There was a screening at the White House. And we also had support from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, really a more conservative think tank. And I remember having conversations with both. And I remember folks inside the White House saying, well, they're hammering us on Obamacare, on healthcare. And I said, but they're not hammering you on access and opportunity for young people in this country, dreamers, who are here and should be afforded all of the benefits of our citizenry. And to their credit, the folks inside the White House was like, you're right. And again, it goes back to that notion of rubbing elbows with people who may not agree with you in order to move the ball forward. And during that process, I mean, we were having events with the right, events with the left. I think we opened up the U.S. Chamber's West Coast office with a screening of Underwater Dreams.
Yeah.
And to me, that's so rewarding because it means that we focused on the human issue. And how do we think about this collectively? Because I maybe I'm too optimistic. I fundamentally believe, Martin, we are more alike as humans than we are different.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we spending so much time on the fringe edges of what we disagree about when there's so much we all agree about? Everybody wants to be a good citizen. Everybody wants to be a good parent if you're a parent, right? Like everybody wants to be productive. Let's focus on how we get there as opposed to what drives us apart.
So you're more than a filmmaker, in as much as I'm not trying to do down filmmakers and directors. Your films have a purpose and seek to achieve something tangible. Why is that?
So that's a great question. And I think that really came out of my first film experience. I mean, I'll be honest, and I'm going to show you how shallow I am. I originally thought I was going to write screenplays, and I had some screenplays, by the way, bouncing around Hollywood. That's a hilarious story. And that I'd have like this chair with my last name on it. And I don't smoke, but I'd have like some fake, cigarette and be cool and hip. And okay, I'm not cool or hip. So there's that. And this path of documentary filmmaking just sort of erupted in ways that I could never have expected around a sport that I loved and a hero and role model in Chris Ernst. And when I saw the impact that A Hero for Daisy had, dads were writing letters like, I couldn't talk to my teenage girl for 2 years. We saw your movie together. Now we're able to have a conversation. Or my 6'2" daughter used to walk hunched. She saw your movie and now she's like walking like, right, like whatever it was. I was like, all right, this is the beginning. Like you can have a piece of entertainment, it comes and goes, but if you can affect somebody and how they view the world, oh, that's magic. That's sacred ground. Mr. Rogers, we used to have this Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Fred Rogers had this children's show, and he used to say the space between him and the children was sacred.
Yeah.
I've loved that. And I feel like our responsibility with the communities in which we're invited, that's sacred space. And I bear really personal responsibility, and I feel a very heavy burden in terms of getting these things right and making sure that we are only building the risers. And at the end of the day, I've had my 15 minutes, especially in the early days, to be in the New York Times or whatever. You're like, what? I must be, like I'm really something. You know what? We're on this planet such a short time. What is it that you want to do? And I feel like if I can leave this place just a little better, and I love the way, I'm going to borrow Arche's phrase. He's like, one of his coaches used to say, you see a mess in the boathouse, you don't just leave it. You pick it up, you put the oars away, and you make it better for the next group of people or the next generation that's coming in. And I feel very much like, what can I do to make something a little bit better for somebody or some group of people? And if I've done that, that is just so personally meaningful to me.
So how would you balance out in terms of choosing a project, the cinematography, the impact that the film would have, the story and everything as opposed to the cause? How
Yeah,
does
they're great question, and they're wrapped up really. So, like sometimes we've been eerily, our projects seem to like really resonate like with a national dialogue with a press, and that's just been intuitive. So I'm working right now on a Native American project that is going to be so timely. Again, it's just like this weird intuitive feeling, right? Sometimes people will call me, they'll have no funding, like Arshay, and I'm like, I need to go make this happen. My project that Grant and I have on deck is an amazing story about back in the world of sports, about this pioneering women's team that will
wow.
I'll feel like back in my element. And so part of it is projects will come in or I'll see stories and I'm like, oh, that's so inspiring. And if it's inspiring, that's when I think it can have real impact for others to see it, right? And reimagine what might be possible for themselves.
How does the directing process
Oh no, I am such a pain in the ass to work with. I'm the worst. My right hand man is actually out today. Otherwise, I'd bring him in and he'd be like, "She's," and he's been with me for 10, I don't know, 10 or 11 years. I am so anal, so I sweat every detail. I sweat every frame. I sweat every fade to black. This is emblematic. I'm working on my current project with a composer who has worked with Whitney Houston, Luther Vandross, Boys to Men, and I'm
wow.
humming to him a particular. I'm like, Shep, can you do like da 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 or whatever it is? Because I
Yeah.
know enough about music to be dangerous. And he's like, oh, okay, Mary, I got you, right? And so what I try and do is surround myself with people who are far more talented than I am. And I like weigh in, and it's like that balance of not being oppressive, but I am super anal. And so I am constantly reviewing cuts. I am very heavy hand, right, when it comes to editorial, and partly that's my nature and training as an athlete, right?
Mm.
You cannot just say somebody else is going to take care of it. But it's also the immense responsibility I feel towards the subjects who are in my film, because they have granted us the extraordinary privilege of their story. I cannot get it wrong. So, oh yeah, I'm pretty much the worst.
And how does it work being the writer as well?
So my job really, I write, direct, and produce. And so on this project, my current project, I sort of will write a first draft, and I co-wrote this current project with Alex Sokolow. Alec wrote Toy Story, Cheaper by the, like a ton of Hollywood movies. And so Alec has been part of my brain trust now for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 films. Allison Abner, who wrote for Narcos and West Wing,
Yeah.
joined us on this project. Having writers of that kind of magnitude,
Wow.
both from a narration script story, as well as how are we like how is this story and narrative unfolding in real time? You know, documentaries can be some, you don't want your audience to fall asleep. You don't want a 5th grader to be like looking at their cell phone, or right? How do we construct these so that they are in a story form compelling and captivating, and your audience doesn't want to go up and get, you know, Doritos or a Coke right in the middle of it? So that's, I again, I have a very heavy hand, but you know, the people around me are just extraordinary. And so, you know, we've got a graphic designer whose graphics are like, you know, so I will say, this is kind of my vision, this is my idea, and you try and let people around you fly. And again, I'm kind of a pain in the ass, so it's a balance for me. But you know, I have people that I've worked with a very long time that, you know, you get into this groove and you trust, and they know you and you know them, and it's a team. At the end of the day, it's a team.
Yeah. What goes on for you when someone says, "What's your favorite film?" What do you start thinking of?
I feel like that's like asking who's your favorite child. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, my husband just watched a cut of our current film and he's like, this is your best movie ever. I feel like, it's like training. Every project, your craft is refined. Every project I get better. Every project, my editorial skills improved, right? My directing, my sense of story. How am I listening in interviews? And so every film is better than the last, which is, I think, the goal. But again, it's like this journey of improvement, just like you would have as an athlete.
Yeah. There's a big rowing film due out in the States this year, isn't there?
Boys in the Boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am super excited to see how that does, where it goes. And I hope that it's just mind blowing. I mean, George Clooney is directing, and it will be exciting. I think, for those of us in the sport to see, okay, are the catches getting in? Are there body doubles? Like, how does that finish? It's not believable. And that's the one thing that for A Most Beautiful Thing, I wanted the cinematography. So we shot A Most Beautiful Thing with a Hollywood film, with the Alexa. And critics, were like, oh, it's visually stunning.
Yeah.
And it was like, even though the guys were masters rowers who hadn't picked up an oar in a long time, right? They challenged themselves to race. I was like, this still has to be like visually stunning. And how do we achieve that? How close can you get the drone over their heads as they're racing, right? Like all of, we lost a drone in the water. Like, how do you,
yeah.
How do you cover the sport that we love? I feel like one of my favorite rowing scenes of all time, aside from A Most Beautiful Thing, is that scene of Henley in Fincher's A Social Network.
Yes, that's true, actually.
That was filmed with, like, they call it shallow depth of field, where, it's blurred around the edges. I thought that was majestic. And coming from a filmmaker that didn't know the sport, I was so impressed. And I was like, oh, I bow down to that cinematographer and that production design around The Social Network, right? Sort of how they constructed that. And of course, both the Winklevoss brothers came and supported A Most Beautiful Thing.
Yeah.
So they're good friends and really thrilled that scene was so beautiful.
I think for Boys in the Boat, they had a coach for the actors so they could do basic rowing, and they had body doubles in an 8.
Good.
With a coach as well. So I don't know how that's going to work, but I know both coaches. I met them when they were filming down at my club, which was the kind of.
Were they US coaches?
No, because he did everything. I think he did all the rowing on the Henley Reach by Upper Thames and at Multi Boat Club, which is my club, which was the boathouse for the Olympic regatta.
Fantastic. Oh, good. So were the coaches good? I mean, are they good technical coaches?
Yeah, they were. Yeah. What can I say?
I don't need to put you on the spot, but
yeah,
we'll see. We'll have a look at those body double catches, and then we'll know, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, are you involved in the Head of the Charles at all?
Oh yeah, I get to announce, which is super fun. I race every year, so talk about full circle. My doubles partner from the games, who she and I were so different. She and I have stayed together, and this will be our, I don't know, we've rode the Head of the Charles almost every year together as a double. And we train, we go out, and when Jevi Stone was training for the Olympic Games, we'd sometimes go out and join the scrum out there on Saturdays, and we do AT, and we do 2-minute pieces. And, for me, Martin, and I don't know if you still get out there, but at this age, you shove off the dock, you're in with your partner from so many years, and that little bag of worries that you carry in your backpack, right? You put that on the dock, you shove off, and you focus in, and it's as if it were yesterday, right? And you can reclaim that backpack of worries when you get back on the dock, but it's such precious space. And doing it with somebody who had that shared experience, being at the games together, it's a really, really special thing. And I saw my daughter was quoted, Daisy was quoted in an article, and I was so touched because she said, you know, I almost drove her out of the sport, by the way. Can I tell you that story?
Yeah, please.
She was maybe 9 years old. I took her out in a double. She forgot her water bottle. It's a really hot day. And she's like, Mommy, I'm really thirsty. And I basically said, you'll be fine. We come in. She's yay high. She had a little bit of heat sickness, throws up, and she's like, I hate this sport. You go backwards. It's stupid. And I'm like, oh, no. And we lost her. She was an ice hockey player for like until she hit the 9th grade. And she's like, I'm not having anything to, and I ruined it. Right. I'm like, oh. And then a friend said, hey, there's this team in high school and let's go out for it. And I'm so glad that she came back to the sport. But yeah, I almost did her in. That's for sure. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I was. You had asked another question, and I segued off to that. But
no, we were talking about the head of the Charles.
So Cindy and I race every year. So we're racing our double. We've been invited in by these youngsters to row a quad, and it's adorable because they win their age group and every year. And I said to them, I'm like, we're not really a prize anymore, Cindy. And they're like, oh, it'll be fun. And so, we're mixing it up with young people, and Cindy and I give out medals and we heckle the crowd, when we go down there. And so for us, it's really just a beautiful weekend. It's on the calendar and we see all of our friends, and it brings you back in time. And now, Daisy's going to be racing her 8 from Belgrade. They're going to have their same lineup and go down the course. And I think I might be announcing that race or maybe whatever. And so that's like, it's so fun. And to be just like in her posse, just like I'm part of our Shay's posse, to just like marvel at, at what my daughter can bring to a team and the maturity with which she approaches and her thoughtfulness about what that means. It's, I love it. I love her, of course, to pieces, and doesn't matter what she does on the water. She is an extraordinary person, and as is my son. And, you want to try as a parent to not slow down the boat. And believe me, as a parent, I have had my, parent fuck up moments, but hopefully, I did not profoundly slow down either of the boats of my children. And that's all you can hope for, as flawed an individual as I am and continue to be,
Just in terms of, we've been talking for almost an hour now. I just wondered, in terms of looking forward, how much of a forward thinker are you, or an in the moment person?
Oh, that's a really good. When it comes to like sweets, I am an in the moment person. That's a great question. Right now, project wise, I'm thinking about this project. What is our strategy for impact, right? How are we positioning this? What's the goal? I have our next project teed up that I'll start in, early, late this year, early next year. Beyond that, I have not really figured out what's project 3, 4, 5, and 6 after that, because I'm really like, again, when I think about, funny, you mentioned this, when I think about my training, right? It's like, focus in on what you're doing right now. And that is where you do your best work. Not what's here, not what's there, who's what lane here, what lane there. How am I focusing in now? And so I'm a little bit, I just think I've been able to develop that way. Again, part of the lessons of Chris Ernst. So back, way back when.
Wow. Well, Mary, I have to say that's been an amazing 65 minutes or so.
This is so fun. Thank you for inviting me. Great to, of course, see you. I'd love to just come and do some color next time you're announcing.
You're on.
they have to keep, my longtime announcing partner at the head of the Charles, Ellen Minsner, who you probably know.
I know. Yeah.
Ellen, she's like, Mary, you can't say that, because I'm like, oh, the coxswain really missed this bridge, or like I get very excited, when you've got 4/8s coming around, the bridge, Cambridge Boat Club, and now you can't coach. You can't say what's happening for people to get out of the way, which I think is really just a human thing you would want to do. But, the audience needs to know what's going on. And so we try and provide it. But yeah, I go a little bit unscripted, which I just need to be a little bit careful about. I have never dropped the F-bomb on the mic, which is good, but I'm close.
So, Mary Mazzio, we'll end the live part of this interview now. We hope that Daisy is going to be in that team for Paris, and the 8's going to be going really fast.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, it's a very, very exciting proposition for the group of women that are training. And she'll be in Princeton training, with all the other unbelievably talented women, and just excited to see what the entire team can accomplish. We saw some great bright lights come out of Belgrade. We saw some areas for improvement, and it's all really exciting, and excited to see what the coaches will have in store to convert some of these silvers into golds, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. That's going to be really, really exciting.
I wasn't going to ask that question.
I have no inside knowledge other than, right, you've got some great, bright results coming from World Championships, and it'll be interesting to see how the progression happens. And, it's just going to be a wild ride.
Brilliant. Mary,
Right.
thank you very much.
All right. Are we still